Hi, I'm Lois Vogel-Sharp. This is episode 7 of What Does God Think? And this episode is about what does God think about our justice system? So, to start off, we have to understand what is God's justice system? God's justice system has to do with his rules, his laws that he's given us, and whether we follow them or not. And God always does righteous judgment. In other words, it's the right thing to do. God never, ever doesn't do the right thing. Ever. That's why we're not the judge. Because we have no clue what he sees in a person or what's in a person's heart. But he does. Unless he reveals it to you through the Holy Spirit somehow, with the gift discerning of spirits, you don't really know. Therefore, he is a righteous judge, and he will judge things accordingly. All right? And there are judgments that are coming. But they'll always be righteous. But this episode is not about his justice system. This episode is about our justice system and what he thinks of our justice system. Our justice system, from the beginning in America, was based on justice and what's fair. In the Constitution, all right, in Article 3 of the Constitution, this is what it says. It guarantees every person who's accused, they have the right to a fair trial before a competent judge. The word competent judge is in there. And a jury of one's peers. That means a jury of people similar to you in life. A competent judge. All right? A fair trial. This is in our Constitution. And that's pretty good, isn't it? I think that sounds really good. Sounds fair and just, right? Then we have our Pledge of Allegiance, which also makes a statement in it. What I'm doing is I'm pulling out things that signify our justice system and the way it should be running. I looked up a whole thing about the Pledge of Allegiance that we've all done since we've been kids in school. All right? It was written a certain way, and until 1954, they didn't have in it one nation under God, but it was put in 1954, and it's been that way ever since. Because it is one nation under God, and that's how this nation was created, under God. We took all the biblical laws that God has set in motion, what God says is right and what God says is wrong, and we pretty much incorporated it in our law system. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, all right? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. These are things that are in the law. In other words, you don't go and you take your neighbor's wife and do something you shouldn't do with her. There are just laws that God has set in motion, and we basically follow those laws. All right? You don't take what doesn't belong to you, basically. That's one of the most simplest laws that we know. Thou shalt not steal. You don't steal. You don't go into a store and break in and just take everything because you feel like taking it or you feel justified in it. So there are certain laws. Now, in the Pledge of Allegiance, this is what it says, and this has said this since 1892. 1892, this has been being said by children and adults too. One nation under God, indivisible, which means unable to divide, with liberty and justice for all. With liberty and justice for all. We said that every day for years and years and years as children. We have it memorized. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. What you're saying when you say that is you're in this country and you're pledging allegiance to the country, and the country's laws and rules, and you're agreeing to it. We didn't know that as a kid. We just learned it. We were told to say it, so we said it. But as an adult, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's America. That's what we stand for. With all that, all right, we have some kind of a framework of what our justice system is all about. Equality, fairness, all right? Everybody's created equal in the eyes of God, it says. Then there's biblical things that are said. Matthew 5:6 says this: Blessed is he who thirsts after righteousness. Blessed is a person who thirsts, hungers after what is right. God considers them blessed, all right? Matthew 7:1-5, it says this: Judge not, that you be not judged. Actually, I'm going to continue and read a little bit more. I got it marked here. Matthew 7. I'm going to start with verse 1. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you put out, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdeth the mote that's in your brother's eye, but considereth not the beam that is in your own eye? Or how will they say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of your eye, and behold, there's a beam in your own eye? And then he basically says, well, that's kind of hypocritical, he says. You're acting like hypocrites when you do that. So there are things telling us we, as human beings, are not to be judging one another. These are biblical things. John 7:24 says this: Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So if you're in a situation, you're a judge, or you have a position of authority, like a pastor of a church, whatever conclusion you come to in whatever situation you're dealing with, it has to be righteous judgment. It cannot be how the person looks or appears, because looks can be very deceiving. You could look at somebody and think they're a real dirtbag just by the way they look. And then you start having a conversation with them and you realize they're very intelligent and they're very caring, loving people. Why do they dress like that? I don't know. Maybe they don't care about how they look. Maybe that's not one of their issues in life. We tend to be very focused on how we look all the time. Let's face it, that's the first thing we judge with each other when we meet each other. When you see my videos, what's the first thing that you do? Is you're looking at me, aren't you? You're probably checking me out. Oh, gee, she looks good today. Oh, she looks tired today. Oh, what happened to her? That's what we do. We can't help it because we're human beings. And we tend to have a judging nature. We have to keep that under control because we're not to do that. Because what I look like on the outside really has nothing to do with who I am on the inside. That's why, in order to bring healing to America and to the body of Christ, we have to go beyond what we see on the outward person, and we have to look inward, because God sees our hearts. He doesn't look at our outward appearance. He sees our hearts, and that's what he goes by. So that's what we have to determine, how we live our lives as God's people. Now, if you're not caring what God thinks, and you're just going by your flesh and whatever you want to feel, there's a real problem there. Because this is what's happening in our country right now. We have good laws. We had laws where if people did something they shouldn't have done, they got arrested. And they paid the consequences for it. They had to go to court. They either had to pay, a fine, or they go to jail. But what is happening now is we are not going by biblical things that we should do and shouldn't do. And it's filtering down through everything in our society. So let's look at that now. Let's see that clearly. Because that'll give us an understanding of how God is looking at our justice system. I don't think God thinks our justice system was set up in a wrong way, because it was set up by his rules. But what is he thinking about it now? What is actually happening now to our justice system? So in order to figure that out, we have to figure out what justice actually means. What is justice? Justice is people being treated impartially. That means you don't look at somebody and decide, well, I don't like the way they look, or I don't like the color of their hair, or whatever it may be. We don't do that. They're treated fairly, impartially, properly, and reasonably by the law and those who decide the law. Who decides the law? The government has decided the law of the land. We have laws of the land. There might be some separate laws in different counties. Maybe you have a law in your county that on Saturdays you can't park your car on Main Street because maybe there's something that goes on there. So if you break that law, you get a fine or whatever. So there are laws, and we have to know the law or we'll get penalized by it. If you're driving a vehicle and you've never been told that you have to stop at a stop sign and you just go right through it, you can get a ticket. If you tell the police officer, I didn't know I had to stop, you know what he's going to say to you? Oh, well, you shouldn't be driving if you don't know what the law is. Here's your ticket. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. So it has to be done fairly. He can't just pull somebody over and say, well, I'm going to give you a ticket today because I don't like the way you look. Could he technically do that and make up some lie? Absolutely he could. We know in this country that there are a lot of lies going on and people are not being judged fairly or impartially. We know there's a lot going on with party lines. And if you're not on one side, the side that's in control, you already have a strike against you. That is not fair justice. And God looks at that and he doesn't like it at all. Since he's a righteous judge, he expects the judges of our land to be righteous judges also. But are they? We know for sure they're not. Because we see things playing out that we know are just not fair and it's just not righteous judgment. The justice is in the court system. It should be in the court system. We make personal judgments towards one another. We shouldn't be doing that. They should be impartial, not influenced by personal feelings. That's what that means. To be treated impartially. You don't go by your feelings. You might have a feeling about somebody. You might not like them. Maybe you don't like the way they look. But you don't judge them for that reason. You have to be fair. You have to look at the situation and say, wow, what actually happened here? Good point. They have to say, what actually happened here? What happens when they have these riots over somebody was murdered or whatever? A police officer shot somebody. He's white, the guy's black. What happens? Before they even find out what actually went down, they're up in arms about the whole thing. He's prejudiced, he shot him just because he's black, and they go into a whole scenario of something they don't even know whether it's true or not. This is dangerous. And this is what's actually going on in this country. We don't wait for justice. real justice to take place. And then we have judges. What did it say? What did it say there? Article 3 of the Constitution? Judged by a competent judge. Would you call a judge competent if he came in and he was drunk? Sitting up there with his little hammer thing? Would you declare a judge competent who's up there for his own little fame and glory and has already decided that someone's guilty before he even sees the evidence or hears the trial? Would you say that's a competent judge? The people that are still sitting in jail on January 6th, some of them that all they did was walk through the hallway and they haven't even had a trial about it. They're just still sitting there rotting away in jail. Is that fair? When cities were destroyed by Black Lives Matter people just because they felt the need to do it because they were showing their disapproval of something? We don't have the right to destroy property or other people's properties. I don't care how ticked off you are. I don't care how mad I am. I don't have the right to go to my neighbor's house and start smashing windows. They didn't have the right on January 6th to do that either. Those that entered that realm, and I don't even know why they went into that realm, but they didn't have the right to do that. But we're not to be impartial either. They're not to be impartial with that. Influenced by personal feelings. They were very much influenced by personal feelings because they got ticked off at what they did. And yet, all the groups that went out and destroyed the cities and basically burned them down, none of them are sitting in jail. None of them. Why? Why? Is this a fair justice system in America? So what is God thinking about that when he looks down and he sees that? Incompetent judges. He sees impartiality going on. Just because you follow Trump, you're already deemed an insurrectionist. He hasn't even been nailed for that crime. And yet they're trying to throw him off the ballot. There's no way the Supreme Court is going to say that he should be thrown off the ballot. There's no way. There's absolutely no way that can happen. Unless we've really gone down the tubes big time. And then we're done. But I don't believe we've gone that far yet. There are still righteous judges. And they will do the right thing. They will do it impartially. Because if you're not convicted of a crime, you can't be punished for it, can you? Well, that's what they did with the January 6ers. Half of them weren't even punished. They weren't even condemned with the crime. But some of them did commit crimes. They went and destroyed property, government property. That's a biggie. I can't even understand why they would do it. I'm not talking about those that were implanted there to create havoc. Anybody in their right mind that was a follower of Trump should never have gotten involved with that. That's not the way to win. But fair justice should be for all, not just for one group of people. You see, they're singling out one group of people in this country. And that's the MAGA people. Make America great again. That's all it means. Because they've deemed those people we're part of a cult of worshiping Trump. No, we're part of a group of people that wants our freedom like it's supposed to be according to the Constitution. What does it say there? A fair trial. Fair. Every person accused has the right to a fair trial. One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. That means freedom and justice. What is justice? I'm explaining to you what justice is. I'm going to say it again, what justice is. People being treated fairly, impartially, not influenced by personal feelings towards that person. Reasonably by the law. Properly and reasonably by the law. In other words, if you broke the law, there's a reasonable punishment for the law that you broke. Not something like 1,000 years in jail when all you did was walk with some kind of flag and walk in. This is where the problem is. Fair means without cheating. Something is not fair if there's any cheating whatsoever. It's not fair if you play a game and the other side cheats. It's not fair if you take a test and you cheat to get a better grade. We all know the stories. Some of us have probably cheated in our lives, in school or whatever. Cheating to win an election is not the right thing to do. First of all, it's against the laws of our land. And it can't stand. It's going to have to be, it is being dealt with. That's why it's being brought out there. That's why Lindell is out there finding out all the situations where cheating was going on, is stuff in the balance, all these things that were taking place. We have to make sure and keep our eyes open for that and make sure we get out and we vote and we do what we have to do so that we have a fair presidential election. I'm sure they're going to cheat in places, but they can only cheat so much. And now that the eyes are open and looking around, they're not going to get away with what they did in 2020. You see, because even those on the left side are starting to get very upset with injustice. They don't like it either. They don't like it either. You know, when they throw out on X, you know, oh, he's been indicted all these times and this and that and this and that. Most of them they're lies. Anybody can say anything about anybody. That's what's creepy. Somebody could make up a story. Listen, I did daycare for years, and I'm going to share something that's personal and private to show you how injustice can hit anybody and everybody. I did daycare for 18 years, and I was a good daycare provider. I had love for the children. I never touched a child. I never tried to touch a child. Some of them are really, really annoying and really bratty. And I'm glad they weren't my children. But I never touched one of them. And I never did anything that I should not have done. But one woman who brought her child to me, she had the child over the weekend, and the baby had a very bad diaper rash. She didn't want to get in trouble for it because she was being watched by the government already for kind of like not taking care of her children. She called Albany and hotlined me and told Albany that I allowed her child to get a diaper rash because I wasn't taking care of her properly. She also told them that I locked her child in the bathroom, one of her children in the bathroom. Now, that was a total fabricated lie. So what has to happen after that's done? Albany has to show up at my door, knock on my door and say, I'm here because somebody hotlined you. You know what that feels like when you know you didn't do anything wrong? It's not very fun. Now, it's kept secret who hotlines you, but it was obvious by the fact that it had to do with a diaper rash that I knew who it was. So I talked with them about it, and I told them she had the baby in the emergency room over the weekend. because the mother had told me that for the diaper rash. So there was proof that the baby had it before she even came back to me, which was kind of ignorant on her part. But it was good for my part. So it was unfounded. But that's what you deal with. I also had a child one day. The husband calls me on the phone and he's screaming on the line at me. You burned my child's finger. I'm like, what are you talking about? And now he's screaming at me. I'm like, hey, stop screaming at me. You burned my child's finger. I said, I did nothing with your child's finger. If your child would have burnt her finger, I would have told you. And there's no way she could have burnt her finger in my house, because there was nothing on that she could have touched to burn her finger. And he lost his temper and had a fit. Find out that his mother, who was watching the child for him over the weekend, whatever it was a smoker. Took the cigarette butt out of her mouth and flung it on the floor. And the baby went over and picked it up to play with it and burnt her finger. I told him, you know what? Take your child out of my daycare, because I'm not dealing with you. And that's what you have to be. You have to be on the alert for things like that in life. And you make sure you have your back covered. Because that's what you deal with this world of injustice and the foolishness of people jumping to conclusions before they even know the facts. He jumped to a conclusion before he even talked with his mom or anybody else. I was the one to blame, because he obviously didn't want to blame his mother. He wanted to find fault with me. I felt terrible because she was the sweetest little girl, and her mother was a sweet lady. I said, I'm so sorry. I'm not watching your child anymore. You have to really be cautious. Woman wanted to put my kids in daycare years ago too. She says to my husband at the time, oh, ministers are the worst sex offenders. Oh, my husband's a minister. I'm a minister. She's going to put them in my daycare after she makes a statement like that to me and my husband. He said, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to watch your children. She got all upset about it. He says, do you really think I'm going to watch your children when that's in the back of your mind? Be very careful. In a world of things that are not just, and cheating and lying and deception is out there, and it's very prevalent. It's very prevalent now because the devil's rising up on the earth. And he is manifesting through people wherever he can. Whoever will allow the demons to come in and do their thing, that's where they're going to be. And when you're a child of God, you have to see that clearly. And you have to have righteous anger against it and bind its power in the name of Jesus. Because people have gone to jail who are innocent in this world. Innocent. Just because the circumstances looked like they were guilty. And there was no evidence to prove that they were innocent. So don't think that the devil can't throw a bunch of charges on somebody and then everybody looks and says, oh no. Look what she did to that child. Rumors can spread like wildfire. So what do we do about it? We know who we are in the Lord, and we just live our lives keeping our eyes on Jesus. Because one day, he's coming back. And we're coming back with him after we get raptured out of here. And there will be no more of that going on, because he will not allow it. Until the devil's loosed again, and I don't even know what's going to go on then. But he's going to tempt once again. But this is what we're dealing with in America right now. Truth. Truth is what is in accordance with the fact or reality. Truth is the real thing, not what someone's imagination might be or what they want it to be. What is a fact? Facts are not things that are imagined or invented. Let's say that again. A fact is not something that's imagined or invented. It's a fact. You have the facts, you have the proof. Just like when she tried to claim I gave the baby the diaper rash, the facts were the baby was in the hospital over the weekend and was seen by a doctor. And I was not watching the baby over the weekend. That was the fact, which proved me to be innocent. And when they said I locked them in the bathroom, the fact was there was no way I could have locked them in the bathroom because there was no lock on the door that they could have reached. There was no way I could have locked them in. So again, the facts showed that there was no way I could have done it. Facts. We must fact check everything. This is why people still believe that Biden is this wonderful president. They've not fact checked anything out. They've not seen that all the lies that he said the other day when he spoke about January 6th. Did you hear him say that Trump called for them to go and do this and attack and all this and that? That Trump called for violence? That's basically what he said. I'm not saying the exact words, but that's what the man said. He lied, and he lies and lies and lies. Not truth and not fact. So what is God thinking of our justice system? And the fact that there's a bunch of liars out there and a bunch of incompetent judges out there being impartial? Not being impartial. Coming against people because of their own emotions and feelings. They want to nail you, so they're just going to lie about you and convict you of something you didn't do. That's what we're doing. And God does not like it very much at all. What is real? What is reality? It's a real event. An entity or state of affairs that actually happened and is real. What's the imagination? It's to form a mental image of something not actually present to our senses. To think, believe, or fancy in your own mind. Imagination is the result of a tinkering in your brain that combines and modifies stored perceptual information and concepts leading to the creation of a story. Let me make that a little more simple. It's things in your mind that you know have learned about in your mind, and information that you've heard over the years, whatever, and concepts that you put together to create some kind of a story. It's an imaginary story. It's not real. People do that when they write books. They just come up with an idea of things that over the years they've seen. They put it together and they come up with a story. And some of the stories are great. Some of the movies we've seen are fantastic movies. Imagination. But the imagination should not be involved when any form of judgment is being rendered. It just doesn't work. Stored perceptual information. Perceptual information is recognition by the senses, the vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. In other words, all your senses are in action, and you're coming up with something that's involved in that to come up with your story and your thought of what you want to say. You remember the woman years ago? Her 2 children drowned in the car. And she said, I'll never forget it, with tears and weeping, they took my babies. And she went on and on and on. And she described what they looked like. And they took my babies. And then you find out that she did it. She put her 2 kids in the car and sent the car in the water. And she drowned her own 2 children. She made up a lie, and a story. And of course, everybody was behind her. What about Judge Kavanaugh with the woman that made up the story? The guy lived his whole life. He was celibate. He was going to be, not till he got married. And yet they made up a story that he raped some girl or whatever. She lied. She made it up. They found out that wasn't true too. Trying to discredit him so that they wouldn't pick him as a judge. We better watch our lying tongues in this world. God says it's the deadliest part of the body is the tongue. It sets a fire. It looses the power of hell when it speaks lies about somebody. I've had lies said about me in my life. And it can mess your life up if they're big enough and they're out there enough. Thank the Lord I've never had to deal with that. But doing daycare for 18 years and having some parents, that same person that hotlined me that day asked me like a year later, will you watch my kids? She had like 5 kids. I could have made a lot of money. Big bucks watching her 5 kids. I told her no, thank you. I wouldn't put myself in that position again. But it was a lot of money. I gave it up. I wouldn't take it. And I was not very wealthy at the time, so I needed the money. Nope. I am not going to put myself in that position. You don't put yourself in a position of that. You make sure you have discernment in the Lord and you have judgment. Righteous judgment with people. Because He'll give you the discernment that we need. Justice. Justice for all. I'm going to read that again. Because I'm going to end with that. Article 3 of the Constitution of the United States of America guarantees every person accused the right to a fair trial before a competent judge and a jury of one's peers. That's what we're entitled to. And that is not going on in this country anymore. That's why we have to get the White House back. So that we can stop all this evil. Because this is really a battle between good and evil. That's what it's come down to. And there's good on both sides. And there's evil on both sides too. Because we're human beings and we have a free will to choose. So, Father, I know what you think of the justice system. The laws are good. The Constitution is good and fair. But we've strayed away from you. And we've strayed away from your laws of justice and fairness. Forgive us, Father, and help us to get back on the right track in this country, in America. Because we're doomed unless we do. Because there'll never be fairness again if we don't stop the injustice and fire those who are not competent and who are not following the rule of law by being impartial. So I'm Lois Vogel-Sharp. I hope you learned a little something, and I'll be back next Thursday at 8 p.m. with another What Does God Think? Episode 8. And I believe episode 8 is going to be on what does God think of Trump? It's going to be really interesting because the Lord's showing me some things. What does God think about President Trump? We all have a lot of opinions on it. So let's see where it goes. So have a blessed day.